The quarantine zone was forbidden human tourists to love it. Commander Zarevos stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Safety Authority station, watching in horror as another human transport vessel approached the Kepler 442 exclusion zone. The massive warning buoys floating in space displayed crimson alerts in 17 different languages, but the cheerful tour bus simply sailed past them like they were street signs in a foreign country. Her communication officer, Lieutenant Kai Hendricks, looked up from his console with barely concealed panic. The young man had only been stationed here for 3 months, and the constant stream of human tourists still left him speechless. Commander Voss, however, had been dealing with this nightmare for 2 years now, ever since the first human family had somehow convinced a smuggler to drop them off at the edge of the zone for what they called a weekend getaway. The zone itself stretched across nearly half a light year of space, a region where the fundamental laws of physics had been shattered during the Great Convergence War. 3 centuries ago, ancient weapons of unimaginable power had torn holes in reality itself, creating pockets where time moved backward, where gravity flowed upward, where colors existed that had no names and sounds could be seen floating through vacuum. The Galactic Council had declared it off-limits to all sentient life. After the first research team emerged speaking in mathematical equations and claiming they could taste the color of next Tuesday, but impossibly, humans had made it the most favored family vacation spot in 3 industries. Zara activated the long-range communications array and hailed the approaching vessel. A cheerful human voice crackled through the speakers, accompanied by what sounded like children singing in the background. Hello there, space friends. This is Captain Rebecca Martinez of the Sunshine Express, bringing 47 passengers for the Kepler Wonder Tour. We've got our tickets right here and everything. Commander Voss shut her eyes and counted to 10 3 times. Rebecca Martinez. She recognized the name. The woman had brought tours here 14 times over the past 12 months, always with a shipload of human families anxious to expose their young ones to what she promised would be the most educational visit throughout the galaxy. Captain Martinez, you are entering a Class X quarantine zone. This area is completely off-limits to civilian traffic. The spatial anomalies pose extreme threat to all life. You are required to turn back right away. Oh, that's just the lawyers talking, Martinez replied with a laugh. We've never lost anyone permanently. Well, except for that one time when little Tommy got stuck in a temporal loop, but he got out eventually. Sort of. His mom says he's much more mature now, even if he is technically negative. For years old. Zara felt her tentacles twitch with frustration. She was Altarian, a species known for their logical approach to problem solving. But humans seemed to exist in complete defiance of logic. They were the only species in the galaxy that looked at a sign reading certain death and interpreted it as a challenge rather than a warning. The reality was something more sophisticated even Zara did not understand. Human beings, it turned out, had some neurological flip that allowed them to cope with the vampire world tools without succumbing to the pattern of mental breakdown that afflicted the rest of the known species. A Volcarian would be shown a floating globe of liquid fire and go bonkers, while humans would nod towards it and say, like, wow, sweet cheeks, check out that lovely impossible object. Are we videoing this, Tommy? Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief xenobiologist, had attempted to elucidate it once while they were chatting over synthetic coffee late one night. Humans had evolved on a world that did nothing but try and kill them, she had said. They came to have an almost supernatural capacity for adaptability to the most impossible scenarios. Their brains actually rewire the connections when presented with paradox. What would send us insane makes them interested. Now, looking out over the Sunshine Express as it came to dock at the temporary tourist platform that had mysteriously been erected within the zone in spite of 3 GSA efforts at demolition, Zara couldn't help wondering if Dr. Vasquez had been justified. The platform itself was a negation, a 4-dimensional structure that also operated through negative space. Human engineers had assembled it from matter that didn't exist, from blueprints inscribed upon surfaces that warped through the 4th dimension. The tourists disembarked, and Zara switched on the external cameras to view the madness from a distance. Kids in bright spacesuits ran giggling towards places where causality laws had gone for a coffee break. Parents came behind them, clicking away while their kids played with balls of frozen time and patted friendly anomalies that were purely mathematical ideas with some form given. She watched as 8-year-old Madison Chen threw a ball into a gravity well that simultaneously split into 17 replica balls, each an independent color, and each one producing a sound like Tuesday morning. Madison clapped her hands eagerly and threw another ball, and this time watched as it transformed into a miniature dragon made out of liquid Tuesday. that began singing the alphabet backwards by color that hurt to behold. Her dad, David Chen, was simultaneously conversing with a spatial distortion that had taken the appearance of a well-suited businessman constructed out of crystallized vacuum. The anomaly was offering David insurance on his memories, apparently convinced that David's memories of the time he attended high school were worth 3.5 pounds of compacted starlight. David was taking the offer seriously. Lieutenant Hendricks turned to Commander Voss with a look of pure bewilderment. Commander, shouldn't we be stopping this? The zone protocols clearly state that any unauthorized entry should be met with immediate forced evacuation. Zara let out a whistle-like sound that came through her breathing appendages. A melancholy sound. That was my thought also, Lieutenant. But are you aware of what occurred the previous time? We attempted an involuntary evacuation of a human tour group. Hendricks shuddered. He had read the reports. The GSA had sent in 3 squadrons of armed peacekeepers to remove a group of 50 human tourists who had been camping in a region where every surface was made of materialized nightmares. The humans had invited the peacekeepers to join their barbecue, somehow managing to grill hamburgers on a fire made of pure existential dread. By the time the rescue operation was complete, 2 of the peacekeepers had married anomalies and 1 had written a best-selling cookbook titled Grilling with Concepts Beyond Mortal Understanding. The human tourists, in the meantime, had rated the GSA officers with 5 stars on their travelogue and had told all their friends about the experience. Commander Voss had learned the hard way that not just the humans were immune to the zone's influence. They appeared to stabilize the anomalies by staring at them. Dr. Vasquez had labeled it the anthropic stabilization effect, the tendency for reality itself to be more predictable when there are humans available to witness it. The zone had, ironically, become less fatal since the humans had arrived, though no one had a clue why. A proximity alarm sounded, and Zara lifted her gaze to see another ship charging towards them. It was the larger, plush ship with the telltale markings of humanity's most expensive tour groups. The sign inscribed upon the hull was Paradox Princess, and Zara felt her heart sink with the thought of what was about to happen. She had feared this day for months. The Paradox Princess was owned by Nexus Tourism, an organization that did what they advertised as extreme reality experiences. Their promotional material gave the customer the opportunity to live through the impossible physics, have encounters with friendly anomalies, and have their selfie with the fundamental forces of the cosmos. They had converted the Kepler exclusion zone into mankind's top location for what they referred to as impossible family fun. The captain of the ship, a woman called Sarah Morrison, had been offering tours to hazardous sites for decades. She had brought humans to the event horizons of black holes, to worlds with solid music ground, and nebular worlds where hues had evolved an autonomous ecology. The Kepler zone was merely her most recent victory, and from her ads, it was all age. Friendly detention GSA station. It is Captain Morrison of the Paradox Princess. We have 300 passengers for the full immersion wonder package. We have children aged 4 through 94, and they are all eager to play with some impossible physics today. Commander Voss felt something she had never experienced during her 40 years with the Galactic Safety Authority. Helplessness. All her program protocols counted for nothing against beings that made cosmic terror their entertainment, and universal menaces their photo ops. Captain Morrison, she tried. Once more, you are violating approximately 4,000 different galactic safety codes. The entities within this zone are not toys. They are manifestations of broken reality that could theoretically unravel the fabric of space-time itself. That's what we're paying for, Morrison chuckled. My passengers have come all the way from all over human space just to try what you people claim is so lethal. Lots of them are repeaters. I've got the Henderson family here for the 5th time. They love what they call the upside-down gravity gardens. Mrs. Patterson came with her whole book club just to see the library of unwritten tomorrows. As if summoned by her words, the tourists began streaming out of the Paradox Princess in groups, each one more impossibly equipped than the last. They carried cameras designed to photograph things that didn't exist, were spacesuits rated for, environments that violated the laws of thermodynamics, and brought snacks that had been specifically engineered to remain edible, even when exposed to pure concentrated impossibility. Zara watched as 4-year-old Emma Rodriguez totaled straight toward a cluster of geometric shapes that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. The shapes, which the research team had designated Hostile Entity Type 47, had previously driven 3 different scientific expeditions into catatonic states. Just by being observed, Emma walked up to them, said hi there, pretty shapes, and began playing peekaboo with mathematics itself. The shapes impossibly began playing back. They rearranged themselves into simpler forms, created small colorful patterns for Emma to chase, and one of them even transformed into something that looked almost like a traditional playground slide, except it was made of crystallized calculus, and slid upward into yesterday. Dr. Vasquez had observed from her laboratory, well below the research station. She emerged now, her normally neat appearance disheveled from spending 18-hour days attempting to understand how humans had managed to turn universal menaces into theme park attractions. "Commander," she said, approaching Zara with the datapad. "Covered in impossible readings, I've been studying the interaction patterns. The anomalies are responding to human emotional states. When the children laugh, the hostile entities become playful. When families express wonder, the reality distortions organize themselves into more comprehensible forms. It's as if the zone is trying to become what the humans expect it to be." Zara read the datapad, but the readings didn't mean anything to her. "Dr. Vasquez, with all due respect, that sounds even more risky than we originally believed. If the zone is redefining itself according to the emotions of people, then what if a person ports negative emotions with them?" Dr. Vasquez motioned toward a patch of the zone, where a young humanoid teenager named Marcus Webb sat alone on a bench of crystal disappointment. Marcus had been going through what his parents called a rough patch, and his pouty attitude had attracted a cluster of lesser anomalies that fed off adolescent angst. The anomalies had organized themselves into the quintessential shape of the feeling of being misunderstood by the universe, and Marcus was having what appeared to be a deeply philosophical argument with an incarnation of existential ennui. "Even the bad feelings are being dealt with in a healthy way," Dr. Vasquez said. "The zone is apparently providing some form of therapy for the humans. Marcus has had depression, but conversing with the physical manifestation of sadness is evidently assisting him through his emotions. His parents report that he has been communicating better since their initial visit." As if to prove her point, Marcus stood from the bench and hugged the personification of malaise. And immediately it became something that felt like hope with wings. The teenager smiled with happiness for the first time in months, and set off to fetch his parents to come and hear about his revelation. Commander Voss felt her worldview cracking like an eggshell. Everything she had been taught about the zone, everything the Galactic Council believed about the dangers of broken reality, was being challenged by humans who treated cosmic impossibility like a neighborhood playground. A second alarm went off, one signifying that something never before seen was occurring within the zone itself. Zara ran towards the sensor array and discovered readings that made absolutely no sense. Even by zone standards, the anomalies were self-arranging, forming structures with no other purpose beyond entertainment and educational value. One area just off the upside-down Gravity Gardens had unconsciously created something that resembled a museum, where friendly anomalies were delivering lectures about the meaning of reality to an enthralled group of human visitors. In another corner, the evil creatures that had once terrorized entire star clusters had grouped together to form something that could rightly be described as a petting zoo, where human children would be able to play with threats that existed only theoretically. Little Amy Foster was indulging conceptual cookies with an entity made out of living probability, while her brother Jake was riding the back of a tame space-time distortion that had formed itself like a horse made out of next Thursday. The transformation was accelerating. Each human visitor seemed to bring about further changes, enabling the area to be less sealed off, less alien, less terrifying. What had once been a zone of sheer fear was increasingly something that defied all previous expectation about how the world was going to act. Dr. Vasquez was literally buzzing with excitement while she worked through the incoming information. "Commander, I believe I can see what is taking place. The zone isn't simply reacting with humans. It is learning from them. Human consciousness possesses the strange quality wherein it can simultaneously support mutually opposed ideas without shattering. It is called cognitive dissonance. But what if it is something else entirely? Reality stabilization. What if the malfunctioning physics is learning from the humans how to make sense once more?" Before Zara had a chance to answer, her comms panel flashed with an incoming priority transmission. The sender ID chilled her blood. Grand Admiral Chen, of the Galactic Council Fleet. The same Grand Admiral whose daughter Madison was even then playing with balls of crystallized time. In the zone below. "Commander Voss," came the stern voice through the speakers. "I am ordering you to implement immediate Protocol 7 on the Kepler exclusion zone. All human civilians are to be evacuated immediately, and the zone is to be sealed permanently with quantum barriers." Zara's world reeled. Protocol 7 was the most drastic action of the GSA handbook, reserved for threats that had the potential to wipe out entire galaxies. It would consist of isolating the area with reality stabilization beams that would seal it off from regular space permanently, eliminating any hope for escape for those locked within, sir. She replied carefully. There are currently over 400 human civilians in the zone, including children. Evacuation would take at least 12 hours, and many of them would resist leaving. That is exactly why we have to take action, Admiral Chen said. The Council has deemed that the interference by the humans with the zone constitutes an existential threat to galactic security. Our scientists are convinced that the consciousness of the humans is making the anomalies transform into something possibly even more threatening than their original configuration. But sir, Zara protested, your own daughter is among the tourists currently in the zone. A long silence. Are you there, Madison? Asked the Admiral, his voice at once far less sure. Yes, sir. She comes regularly with the Chen family tours. This is her 4th visit, according to our records. For the year. One more delay, a longer one. Commander Voss, I'm postponing Protocol 7 by 1 day. I will be traveling there myself to assess the situation. The transmission ended, and Zara was alone with the dubious honor of protecting hundreds of mortals in a realm where the notion of safety was relative, at best. She looked out over the territory, where picnics had commenced upon floors composed of crystallized dreams and children played with the foundational particles of reality. Lieutenant Hendricks came over with another report. Commander, we're registering activity from the zone's core. The central anomaly, the one that has lain inactive ever since the initial incident, is registering activity. Zara's blood chilled. The central anomaly was the source of all the zones. Instability. A wound in reality itself that had been created when 2 universe-destroying weapons had collided during the ancient war. If it was awakening, it could mean the end of everything within 1,000 light years. She activated the emergency broadcast and began passing the word to all the tour craft in the zone. All civilian vessels, this is GSA Command. We are reporting life-threatening instability at the center of the zone. Activate immediate evacuation procedures. The response was immediate and entirely predictable. Yes, isn't that great? Said Captain Martinez. The families are wondering if they can take a glance. Little Timmy is wondering if the critically unstable bridge has a gift shop. From Captain Morrison, my passengers are paying premium prices for premium impossibility. If something new is happening at the core, we want front row seats. Dr. Vasquez was furiously pounding away at her console, attempting to make sense of the zone's heart readings. Commander, the central anomaly isn't destabilizing. It's doing something else. Something never seen. Before she could explain further. The sensors detected a massive surge of energy from the heart of the zone. But instead of the ruinous wave Zara was expecting, something that didn't make any sense whatsoever emerged. It was a surge of pure order. A tide of orderly reality that rolled out from the heart like waves from a pool. As the wave passed through each section of the zone, the chaotic anomalies began arranging themselves into increasingly comprehensible forms. The hostile entities transformed into educational displays. The reality distortions organized themselves into beautiful and inspiring art installations. The temporal anomalies created historical exhibits where visitors could safely observe and learn from the past. The zone was redefining itself as something never before experienced in galactic history. A location where the unthinkable was thinkable, where the risky was magical, where the menacing was illuminating. It was turning out just what the humans had long assumed it was. Commander Voss observed dumbfounded as the transmutation extended throughout the sector. Space that had been classified as toxic to all known life was becoming parks, where people would be free to explore the limits of existence. Experiments that had enraged researchers with madness were turning into hands-on demonstrations, wherein youngsters would be free to discover the essence of existence. Dr. Vasquez lifted her eyes from her books with tears. Commander, the zone isn't just stable these days. It's actually beneficial. The anomalies are inducing side effects that stimulate the creativity of the human race, enhance healthy mental conditions, and increase the understanding of fundamental physics. The zone has turned out to be something useful instead of harmful, as if summoned by their conversation. Grand Admiral Chen's flagship emerged from hyperspace and approached the station. Zara watched as the massive military vessel took position near the zone, its weapons arrays powered but not targeted. The Admiral himself would be aboard, coming to see what his daughter had discovered in the impossible realm that humans had claimed as their own. The shuttle of the Admiral docked at the GSA station an hour later, and Chen himself walked onto the observation deck with the air of a commander ready for battle. He was a grim-faced, gray-haired, battle-hardened sort of military leader, the type of commander who had encountered all the galaxy would throw at him. He surveyed the zone with the gaze of an enemy that had to be eliminated. Take me through the zone, Commander Voss, he said without preamble, in its current state. Zara activated the holographic display system, creating a three-dimensional map of the entire region. What had once been a chaotic mess of overlapping anomalies was now organized into distinct areas, each one serving a specific purpose. The gravity gardens where families could experience different forms of acceleration. The time streams where visitors could safely observe the flow of causality. The reality theater, where impossible stories played out for educational entertainment. And there, in the entry labeled Probability Playground, was the 8-year-old daughter of the Admiral, Madison Chen. She was instructing a group of well-meaning anomalies how to play hopscotch, and did so by hopping through squares that simultaneously existed in several dimensions at once. The Admiral observed his daughter for a few minutes, his face not changing. Then he did speak. "She looks happy." "Yes, sir," Zara replied. According to her parents, Madison's grades have improved dramatically since she started visiting the zone. Her teachers say she has an intuitive understanding of advanced mathematics and physics that they can't explain. Admiral Chen stood back and watched while Madison successfully completed a hopscotch game that had her jumping through yesterday, landing in next Tuesday, and ending up with the strange result of being in the concept of the color purple. The anomalies cheered her triumph by reconstituting themselves back into shapes that represented the feeling of achievement. "Commander," the Admiral whispered, "what would be the result if we closed the zone off as intended?" Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "Sir, from what we know, shutting off the zone would most likely put it back in its previous unstable phase. The human element is seemingly putting a stabilizing force, keeping the anomalies from reverting back to their attack patterns. If we remove the humans, we would possibly put the original crisis back." "What about the humans themselves?" queried Admiral Chen. "They would lose access to something that has become genuinely beneficial for their species." Zara replied, "We have documented cases of improved mental health, enhanced creativity, better problem-solving abilities, and increased empathy among regular visitors. The zone appears to be having a positive evolutionary effect on human consciousness." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long time, watching as his daughter played with impossibility itself and somehow made it look as natural as breathing. Finally, he activated his communication array and sent a transmission to the Galactic Council. "Council Command, this is Admiral Chen. After thorough assessment, I am recommending that Protocol 7 be permanently suspended. The Kepler exclusion zone no longer represents a threat to galactic security. In fact, it may represent something entirely new, a partnership between human consciousness and the fundamental forces of reality itself." The response was immediate, with confusion and fear. "Sir, are you certain about this advice? The area has long been rated a Class X threat over the past 3 centuries. I am watching my daughter play hopscotch with the concept of infinity," Admiral Chen replied. "She is completely safe, completely happy, and learning things about the universe that our greatest scientists have never understood. If that's not worth reconsidering our assumptions, I don't know what is." In the following months, the Kepler zone officially reverted from an exclusion zone to what the humans called a wonder preserve. The Galactic Council reluctantly approved the new designation, largely for the fact that the other choice seemed an endless war with the human sightseers, who refused to stay away despite bans. Special accommodations were made for non-human visitors, though few species could handle the psychological impact of experiencing impossible physics firsthand. Most alien tourists preferred to observe from the safety of the orbital stations, watching in amazement as human families treated universal impossibilities as playground equipment. The zone continued to evolve, apparently learning from each human visitor and adapting to provide new forms of impossible entertainment and education. Areas developed that catered to specific interests: the music of mathematics section, where visitors could hear colors and see sounds; the library of potential futures, where people could read books about things that might happen; and the garden of growing ideas, where abstract concepts took physical form and could be cultivated like plants. Commander Voss was becoming something she did not anticipate: a guide for bewildered alien diplomats, curious about how the humans had achieved the unthinkable. She would take them through the specially shielded observation decks and would be at a loss, trying to recount how a species that had hardly mastered star drive had achieved what the galaxy's most advanced minds had not. The citizens didn't just survive exposure to broken reality, she would tell her dazed guest. They fixed it. No advanced technology, no superior mind, just sheer faith that strange things could be beautiful instead of terrifying. Dr. Vasquez published articles that reoriented galactic thought about consciousness and reality. Her articles suggested that the mental adaptability of humanity was not alien but possibly evolutionary significant. At the cosmic level, other species embarked upon the study of the patterns of the human mind, with the hope of enhancing their own capability for processing. Paradox without going insane. The area itself came to symbolize something historic in the history of the galaxy. The rebirth of a warship as a source of joy and knowledge. The same technologies that had once loomed over worlds, with the threat of destruction now assisted young humanoids in grasping the beauty of mathematics and the marvel of the act of existence. Years went by and the Kepler Wonder Preserve was an essential part of the culture of the humans. Just like their homeworld itself, people would save for years just to visit the impossible world, where their kids would be able to play with the fundamental blocks of the universe. Schools made visiting the zone a regular part of the schedule, aware that certain things couldn't be learned anywhere else other than where the rules of the world did not obtain. But the most significant transformation perhaps wasn't the zone itself, but how it had an influence upon the development of humans. Kids growing up visiting the preserve had greater creativity, better problem-solving skills, and an uncanny ability to grasp complex systems. They had the type of adaptable thinking that came from growing up with games of impossibility. These youngsters grew up to be scientists, artists, diplomats, and explorers with their impossible-trained minds turned to each challenge. They unraveled puzzles that had baffled other species for centuries, created art beyond the limits of conventional categories, and dealt with interspecies interactions with a mindset formed by having grown up with the friendship of living mathematics. Director Commander Zaravos would frequently rise from her observation deck and be awed by what she was looking at. Where she had once observed an alien threat that warranted military action, she would now see families relishing moments of awe that bonded the generations and species closer. During slow days, she'd occasionally venture into the zone herself, closely accompanied and chaperoned in order to enjoy the soft impossibility that men had tamed. She enjoyed how even her rational Altarian thought appreciated the beauty of frozen time, and the humor of shapes that lived in 11 dimensions yet opted to reveal themselves as easy, bright shapes merely for the enjoyment of extraterrestrial guests. The preserve had waiting list years long, but no one complained about the delays. The anticipation itself had become part of the experience, with families planning their visits like pilgrimages to sacred sites. Entire industries had developed around supporting tourism to the impossible. Specialized equipment manufacturers, training programs for guides who could safely escort non-human visitors, and even insurance companies that offered policies for reality-based incidents. Lieutenant Kai Hendricks, now Commander Hendricks and Zara's second-in-command, had long since stopped being surprised by anything humans did in the zone. He had watched families celebrate birthdays with cakes made of crystallized happiness, seen marriage proposals conducted in the language of pure mathematics, and observed funeral services where the deceased were honored by having their memories transformed into beautiful light sculptures that would exist forever in the zone's memorial garden. But the most basic change was in the zone itself. What had begun as a tier in reality had become something like a doorway between the impossible and the possible. Visitors reported that their experience of the zone changed their response to ordinary reality, that they noticed keener attention to the magic of the mundane. Kids who had played with living ideas came home and saw ordinary objects with possibilities for wonder. The scientists hypothesized that the preserve was transforming into something never before seen, an environment where consciousness and reality worked together proactively, forming new possibilities of existence. The possibilities were mind-boggling. If the human race could repair a tear in the basic framework of the cosmos, by looking at it with wonder rather than fear, what else would be capable of being achieved? Other zones of cosmic damage began to be evaluated for similar treatment. Ancient battlefields where reality had been scarred by weapons of unimaginable power were being studied as potential sites for what humans called impossible tourism. Military commanders who had once viewed such regions as permanent threats began to wonder if they might be transformed into resources for understanding and growth. The Galactic Council established the Department of Impossible Relations dedicated to studying the interaction between human consciousness and anomalous phenomena. Dr. Vasquez became its first director, leading research into the mechanisms by which human mental flexibility could transform cosmic threats into cosmic opportunities. But the real measure of the preserve's success was not in the scientific papers or the tourism revenue or the diplomatic breakthroughs. It was in the laughter of children who treated impossibility as a playground, in the wonder of families discovering new forms of beauty together, and in the quiet conversations between parents and children as they discussed the nature of reality. While picnicking on crystallized dreams, Commander Voss often thought about the early days, when she had watched in horror as human tourists ignored every warning and sailed straight into what should have been their doom. She had been so certain that disaster was inevitable, so convinced that the humans were too ignorant to understand the dangers they faced, Now she knew that it had not been ignorance. Not by any means. It had been something much stronger, the uniquely human gift for looking at the unthinkable and beholding not a threat to be feared, but an opportunity to be welcomed. They had succeeded where others had failed, not because they had been wiser or stronger, but simply because they had had the faith that even the most sinister things the universe had created might have space for the marvelous. The Kepler wonder preserve was testament to the greatest discovery of galactic history, that the universe itself could be far more adaptable, far more accommodating than anyone had ever thought. All it had required was a species bold enough to grasp cosmic horror and cosmic comedy alike, and smart enough to hold the impossible with the innocent hope that all things would be possible. After all, the preserve was ultimately something other than a sideshow or scientific curiosity. It was an emblem of hope, proof that the cruelest scars would heal, that the most destructive agencies would be altered, and the future itself would be better even than anyone would ever be courageous enough to hope. Because humanity looked at a zone of quarantine and pictured a locale where families would be able to take holidays together, amidst the impossible wonders of a cosmos that had, finally, learned how to smile.